Hello, everyone. This is Hannah with the Ally Center at LBC. Welcome back to the Ally Advantage, where support meets strategy and students thrive. In our podcast today, and always, we focus on building confidence, clarity, and skills that you can use as an online student. Joining us today from our online team are myself,
Dr. McClenton.
Kristen.
Chantelle.
And Mariah. Glad to be back.
I'm excited to introduce our first podcast topic, which is the research process of prose. Now, I understand when you hear the word research, you may think boredom and drudgery. However, I would like to posit to you today that it can be exciting and fun with the right tools and the resources, because I think the biggest frustration with research is when we're just not able to find what it is we're looking for. But once we find it, it is just a really awesome time to engage with subjects that we're writing about, with subjects that are important to our academic disciplines and our studies. I and the rest of the team have picked up some tips and tricks throughout our education. And what will become apparent is that each of our processes are a little bit different, and that's okay because you'll find that certain things work better for you and certain things maybe don't work as well, and that's totally fine. All of us on the online team have our at least a graduate degree. Dr. McClenton has her doctorate, and Chantelle is currently working to get hers. Each of us is familiar with researching for papers because we have written many of them over our years of education. With that, Dr. McClenton, can you start us off by sharing a little about your research process from your college days, whether that's undergraduate, graduate, or doctoral? What did you do that worked, and what did you try that wasn't so effective?
Well, when I think about, in particular, undergrad work, I was always just really sensitive to what's the question? Like we have the expression, the main thing is the main thing. And so I was always trying to acquaint myself with what is being asked. Okay. Because I understood if I understood the prompt, then that would certainly support me being able at least to begin to look at that process. But I also found out that I had to find out what I didn't know, because when you're researching something, oftentimes you feel like, and this is whether undergrad degree or doctoral degree, you make some assumptions of things that but, you really do have to find out what it is that you do not know. And so for me at the undergrad and graduate level, again, oftentimes they were very specific because there was something that the professor requested, and so I would, find out that question and then gather as much information as I could about that topic. And then, come then from a position, we talk a lot about thesis statements. And so there was a position that I was going to take. And it was always important that that thesis, my handle, as it were, that was my why, and answering my why, so that became very important in my process. I'll just say this very quickly about the doctoral process. I think the difference there is it's a different level of trepidation, because when you start talking about writing at the doctoral level, you don't really know what that is. It's like, what is it? Is that multisyllabic words? Is everything like really deep? And again, I approached the process with just a certain level of fear and trepidation, and often would put off turning things. You had a deadline, but I would like kind of almost stall before I put my thoughts on paper, because I didn't know, well, is this PhD quality? And eventually I just had to jump in the rope and present it. And it's like, okay, it's going to be okay. So I think, there's a greater level of thought, and you're much more aware of your sources and making sure that your argument is even stronger.
Thank you, Dr. McClenton.
Absolutely.
Kristen, how about you?
I said earlier, I feel like it's been so long since I've had to research anything. And I just was an undergrad so long ago. Being organized probably is the thing that worked the most and the best for me in terms of research. And just really keeping track of the sources that I found. Just like an annotated bibliography, you have your source and then a paragraph, and within that paragraph, even though it may have been less formal than that, just in my notes, making sure that I just kept track of why did I think this source was useful? What was it about the source that even drew me to it in the first place? And then again, because this was back in the day, what kind of source was it? Was it an article? Was it a book? Where am I going to find that again in the library? Because believe it or not, I'm talking card catalog days, you know? So that was
Woo!
probably, I know, that was probably what worked for me the most. And then, you know, what I tried that wasn't so effective, waiting till the last minute to find my sources. Procrastinating, that never works for me. So, you know, work ahead, I guess. That's my advice right
Mhm.
now.
Yeah, excellent. Yes, I think all of us have our procrastination stories, and I think we can all
Amen.
attest
Yeah,
that's that can be really detrimental to the research process. So
Yeah.
we all learn. We all learn
Yes.
along the
hmm
way. Chantelle, what would you like to add?
Sure. Trying to think back to my undergrad years, I feel like it was so long ago. And
Hmm.
that research process, I I went into my undergrad not having that experience in high school. We weren't taught how to research
Mm.
correctly. And so I learned the hard way, probably my first semester of freshman year of, you know what, whatever. I'll find whatever, I'll add in a quote. It's gonna be fine. And then I actually met a mentor, and she guided me on how to research appropriately at just
Hmm.
a regular undergrad level. And we went through of how to ask the good questions and how to start early in the process and
Hmm.
not to wait like the week of it's due. And basically, she taught me how to also narrow down the topic. So, what did not work though, was waiting until I just felt ready to do the research because, again, researching it
Right.
wasn't fun to me
Yep.
in my undergrad. And I would wait till the last minute, and then it caused stress. And actually, it didn't help my analysis in any of my writing. And I learned that, around sophomore year. By the time I went into grad school, my approach was much more different and it was intentional, just because the structure of college during that time, and it was online, there were no classes, and they gave you, a semester long to write these papers, or some weeks you had to submit something within a week. So during my grad program, I really learned to take the question and then begin with like a focused problem, and I was able to learn how to do a stronger literature review and use research questions to guide every decision I made along with the research process. I would say what really worked is just breaking down the assignment or the project into smaller steps, meaning I would
Hmm.
research this one area and then move on to the next, and then it would build together, and it allowed for more refinement that way. And then I was able to spend more time outlining and drafting and revising and whatnot. What was less effective, what I learned in my grad program, is it was collecting too much information
Oh,
all
yeah.
at once.
Yep.
And then I sat down and I had to decide of like, okay,
What am I gonna use?
yeah, what am I going to use? Like, what is relevant? Because I thought gathering too much information would help me in the long run. And so that's where those questions came in, and it helped me slow down my process. And when we have too much research, it almost feels like it's making the assignment bigger than it needs to be.
Right.
So that's what I learned in my grad program. At the doctoral level, it has been life-changing. I'm in over my head. The research process is out of control right now. It's less about completing the assignments, and you're learning so much about yourself and life
Mm.
through the research. So it's more of we're taking all of these areas of study and we're trying to contribute to something that somebody has already done, or you're creating something original. And so I feel like a lot of my time is with the research process is more based on like patience, and I'm learning to tolerate uncertainty because I don't know what I'm getting myself into. One area that's working at the doctoral level is staying very close with the cohort. I'm basically taking all of my questions that I learned in the grad program, I'm refining them. So, like every few weeks, I'll change my question, spending more time reading or listening to resources. I'm trying to figure out where the gaps are in answering a certain question, like for the dissertation. So that's been helpful. Another I would say not requirement, but something that's helpful in the doctoral program, and Doc probably knows this because she went through this, is you're constantly revisiting ideas. So something that might have not sat well, months ago, you're coming back, you're like, okay, maybe I can incorporate it here. You're
Mm.
revising all the methods that you're working, and you're almost rethinking the same thing over and over and over again. It always goes back to the why, like what are we trying to learn here? But across all three levels, just to summarize, the biggest lesson that I learned after like the 15 years of researching is it's not about finding the good information that you need. It's teaching you something so much bigger, and it's teaching
Mhm.
you how to make smarter decisions. And like Kristen just said, it's staying organized, and you're refining your questions. It's really teaching us how to think critically. And now I love research because of that. It teaches me other transferable skills.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mhm.
so that's one thing that probably the biggest thing I learned over all of my time at researching is that.
Thank you, Chantelle. That was
Sure,
excellent.
sure.
One thing that you mentioned that really stuck out to me is the idea of not waiting until we feel ready. I
Yeah.
think that that is so key to the research process because whether it's motivation, whether it's being in the mood to research,
Yeah.
it's likely not going to
You're not
just
going to be in the
strike.
mood.
Yes, right. It's
If you're
it's not
tired.
exactly more appealing than just watching a movie.
Mhm.
But
Hmm.
it is really engaging and it helps us refine our thinking, develop those transferable skills.
Mhm.
Yeah, I couldn't
Yeah.
agree more.
Yeah, it's just, and something to add, it's really important to remember like research is not a one-time task. Like you're not just sitting down and doing
Right.
this. It takes weeks, or I mean, in the online program, it's going to take them 5 weeks to just research their specific topic.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're in a bigger program, it's going to take months or years
Hmm.
to research.
Hmm.
So guess what? You just gotta put yourself through it. You
Yeah.
gotta do it.
Buckle up.
Just gotta
Exactly.
do it.
And I think that's encouragement to, especially to offer to undergraduate students who I think sometimes
Hmm.
come into college feeling like, okay, when I have this research question or I have this prompt from my professor, I just need to figure out the right words to put into Google Scholar or to the library
Mhm.
search engine, and it's going to give me what to say.
Mhm.
And actually,
Mm.
it's more of a puzzle piece that we have, a
Yeah.
large puzzle that we have to compile with all these different pieces of drawing conclusions and establishing
Hmm.
connections and answering those really important questions. And so it's not just putting something into the library system and getting something out. It's a much more deeper involved process than that. So thank you.
Hmm.
Mariah, what would you like to share?
I love what you just finished on, Hannah, because that's part of what, as I was an undergraduate and then my graduate program as well, learning that I was a scholar who was part of this academic conversation and not just I'm looking to find whatever the right answer is to the question that I've been asked, was I don't know if transformational seems like too big of a word to use, but it definitely did make a large difference in my research because then it helped me to become that much more engaged in looking for things, becoming genuinely curious instead of just, okay, well, I have to do a 3-page paper on this, so I guess I'm going to look for some stuff and okay, whenever I find something, I guess that's good enough. From a very practical perspective, echoing what Chantelle said, I whenever I was in undergraduate work, especially, was I didn't like research, but I felt like I had to do it well. And so I would find just oodles and noodles of information, and I would have pages and pages of quotes that I was planning to paraphrase and summarize. And it got very overwhelming. And so I definitely echo what she said about, make sure that you're focused whenever you're doing your research. You know exactly what you're researching and you're not going down these tangential paths. That's something that I struggle with even to this day whenever I'm really interested in a topic. Maybe I'll share more about that later. But something that has helped me in both in writing and researching is if there's stuff that I'm like, I like this, but I don't think that it's actually quite relevant for what I'm researching, but I've already like spent the time to type it out. So I want to hold on to it. I want to keep it. I want to maybe save it to you somewhere in this paper. Is I'll just cut it and I'll put it in a separate document. And I'll say, this is a list of stuff that I think I might use. And then
Mhm.
inevitably by the end, I'm like, I didn't need that. And then the entire document just goes away. But at least in the moment, it helps me to feel like I didn't waste the time and energy. And certainly, I would say any research that you do never wastes time and energy because you need to sort through material to figure out what is useful for your specific question and what's not. Um, and so to recognize that even if you don't end up using it, you've still grown from reading that material. You've still been expanded in what the Lord has taught you, which I hope is helpful for all of us as we do research in different areas. Something that I learned in grad school that was very specifically helpful for me, and something that I try to teach my students in class as well, is I had trouble doing research from a screen. I would look at especially some of those complex papers that I would be reading for those scholarly journal articles, and I would be skipping around. I was having trouble reading. And for me to be able to print something out and be able to take notes directly on the material
Yep.
so that I could, put my reactions down, write down how things connected to perhaps my prior class or to other readings, write down questions about, I don't understand what this word is. Help me to actually understand the material instead of just trying to quick skim something so that I could try to find a quote that maybe I could smash into my paper. That was something just very practical that I found to be helpful from graduate school.
Wonderful. Thanks, Mariah. So many excellent overviews and tips and tricks have been shared so far. For me personally, in undergrad, similar to Mariah, something that I so greatly benefited from was learning about research as a scholarly conversation. And so
Hmm.
I was an English major, and so we were talking a lot about literary texts and literature being produced in certain contexts, and then also
Hmm.
scholarly work writing on that literature is occurring in its own conversation. And so when I write a literary analysis, when I'm writing a research paper, I have the opportunity to enter into the conversation that has been taking place for a long stretch of time, and
Hmm.
I get to see, okay, what has this scholar said about this subject? What is this scholar saying? How do they agree? Where do they diverge? How do they sharpen my thinking and my argument and my interpretation of this particular text or particular topic? And so it was really exciting to me to learn about, and at times frustrating to learn about the scholarly conversation, because it required so much of me, and it
Hmm.
required so much more than just finding the right answer or figuring out what I thought I was supposed to say, but actually really going through the process of inquiry and figuring out what I wanted my thesis to argue.
Mm.
And one small thing that I found that worked really, really well in undergrad is going to the index of a book and seeing, okay, are my keywords mentioned? Where are they mentioned? And that to me just really expedited the process, because it can be easy to find a book that's like, okay, this looks generally related to what it is I'm
Right.
writing about, but I don't want to read a 500-page book in the next
Preach.
2 weeks, maybe 1 week,
Preach.
maybe 2 days. Um,
Hmm.
I need to find the information that I need, and I want to review it thoroughly, but perhaps that's only one chapter out of the 20 chapters in this
Yep.
book. And so
Hmm.
the index really helps you to find with certainty where your keywords are being mentioned on which pages, and then you can navigate to those pages and find the specific information that you need for your paper. And so that I just spent hours and hours just poring over so many different books and going from the index and then using different sticky notes to mark down where there was important information and where I wanted to pull that information to include in my writing. And then in my graduate school process, I continued to just build on those research skills, and something again similar to something that Mariah shared was I would have my document compilation of my different sources. And actually, Kristen mentioned this earlier as well. It's similar to an annotated bibliography, but just a little bit more chaotic, of the
Mhm.
citations for the source, but then just quotes and thoughts and conclusions and paraphrases and summaries of like, okay, anything related to that source before it goes on my outline goes here. And then from there, I would draw on that to go into my outlines, into my
Hmm.
drafts. And I
Hmm.
found
Yep.
that to be a really helpful structure for my
Mm.
research, though it at
Hmm.
times felt rather chaotic and unstructured. But it was just the best way for my brain to be able to process through this and this and this fascinating thing.
Hmm.
This connects here.
Hmm.
And knowing that later I could go back to that was just very reassuring.
Thanks everyone for joining us for part one of our podcast, The Research Process of Prose. Stay tuned for part two.
Thanks everyone for joining us today on The Ally Advantage.